concept for Ghost pretty much developed from a coincidence, wasn't it? I mean, you did some studio project that you recorded some tracks, loaded them up into MySpace even back then, and then you had to have something because there were a lot of requests and you had to have some sort of band, which you actually didn't have back then. So you made up the concept, the very early stage of the concept, pretty much by coincidence.
Well, I mean, the apple didn't fall very far from the tree, considering that I've been playing death and black metal ever since the early 90s. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna come up with a completely different thing. Oh, the devil, like, I've been doing devil stuff ever since I was, my first band was a death metal band. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't very, the idea wasn't like very original. It was just, it just felt natural because at the time in 2006, 7, 8, I had sort of stepped away from the extreme metal. I wasn't any longer playing in a metal band. I was playing bass in one band that was definitely not metal, and I was doing my own band that was some sort of pop rock band. So when Ghost sort of appeared in my head and the songs, it just felt very intuitive and very like, this is where my pop sensibilities sort of merge with my metal background. And it just felt very natural to express myself in a way that is, I don't know what a good word for it is, but gothic, I guess.
And your first ever photo shooting was, because you hadn't have a band back then, was with a few masked and disguised friends from the neighborhood back in the day. So that's what I meant earlier.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's funny.
Yeah, no, we were struggling back then because we had, it was kind of like having, invited people to this party and you didn't have a place, you didn't have a venue to have the party in. Mm-hmm. You hadn't bought the alcohol, you hadn't a stereo system. And it was very stressful because everything was sort of built in the wrong order. Mm-hmm. Traditionally when you form a band, you sort of meet up and then you rehearse and then you sort of take the people that shouldn't be there, you take them out, and then you find the good bass player, and then and then after a while you have a band, and then you start playing live, and then you know. Whereas this was just almost the other way around. Knowing now how the music business works and how the entertainment business works nowadays, mm-hmm. I think that maybe it wasn't as unorthodox as it would appear, because nowadays you have to compel people, and you have to grab their attention, and you have to keep it, and then you have to nurture that in a way that is way more frantic than it ever was in back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that more than often, I think that that's very common nowadays. You know, back just 20 years ago, most bands wrote a record rehearsing.
Yeah.
Whereas
Absolutely.
Nowadays, what most bands do, what most artists do, you record it first, mm-hmm. and then you show it to.
Then you need to rehearse it to actually learn the songs to be able to play them live. Huh?
Exactly.
Just you won't be able to play them live coming out of the studio because you never did it. Actually.
Exactly. No, but that's true, and it's quite common. It's a very common modus operandi nowadays. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been a lot of different twists and turns because the project, even early on, was very popular. We had a lot of attention, and that you know forced me and everybody involved to be on their toes, you know.
Over the years, you build up a whole Ghost universe, to say so. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. Not only is it the music, but so many other things too. I mean, what was, apart from the obvious, from the music that you've been talking about a lot, Kiss has been very influential to you, and a lot of other bands that we already spoke about today and that you spoke about a lot. But apart from that, what else was inspirational to you when it comes to literature, art, films? What sort of movies? There must have been a lot that has been inspirational to the whole Ghost concept, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to like pinpoint just a few, saying like, oh, that was, but if we regard just the first record and its lyrical content and my intentions of how I wanted Ghost to sound at the time and what my vision was. It was very driven by my idea of like late 60s, early 70s sort of satanic panic, with the big films, of course, like The Exorcist, Omen, and Rosemary's Baby. Yeah. That sort of, yeah, early satanic stuff. Doom. But I wanted Ghost to be like a new wave of British heavy metal band that, you know, stood alongside a band like Angel Witch, but with a very cool image. I mean, Angel Witch and a lot of those bands didn't have a lot of image. And Demon, for example, was a band that I like, especially the first record. Very cool, but when you see them, you're like, no, I want this band to be so cool. They sound cool, and why do they look like fucking? And so it was very much from a fan base. I sort of that's the music I want to hear, but this is the image that I want to see. Let's combine that, and then as fast forward 10 years later, it's definitely broadened out. Yeah. It's definitely, you know, the idea and the vision is bigger than that now. But still, I draw a lot of influence from music, of course, but also from cinema and literature and poems but being influenced by cinema doesn't necessarily mean that the films that I would throw out there as influential would be like, oh, it has a satanic image. No. It's more like from a crafting point of view. The same way that I take a lot of musical influence from a lot of records that has no satanic undertones whatsoever, except for being a rock and roll record, which per se sort of makes it satanic. But yeah, so it's I have a vast range of different influences.
I was thinking of cinema and movies because it's got a, I mean, you could compare your work to that of a script writer. At the same time, you're the director and the lead actor as well. Yeah. So any identity problems every once in a while?
Well, I mean, if you look from a Rocky point of view, you know, it could turn out for Sylvester Stallone like what Rocky did to him, which was a good, I mean, he did a lot for that film. He sort of had the story and he sort of directed and then he also was the lead character. So it could turn out good, but it could also turn into The Room, right?
Absolutely.
So I really try to the best of my capability and capacity to for the most bit at least, have my head screwed on and keep track of everything. But also, now, years later, obviously everything is grown into an operation where I get to do a lot of the creative stuff, but it's also like distributed throughout like various different compartmentalized sort of offices where you can do. I mean, obviously, what we do for a living is that we do a lot of merchandise, and that has sort of taken on a life on its own because we have so many fans that are extremely gifted and very contributing. So whereas in the beginning I was way more like, you know, we need to do 5 t-shirt designs. Okay, so this is idea 1, this is idea 2, this is idea 3 and 4 and 5. Here we go. Whereas now it's like we're being bombarded with ideas and things from fans, and we usually, like, when we find something that we like, we basically employ that person to work with us.
That's great.
So, which is fantastic. But that also in turn makes that, like, on the merch side, I'm not as creative anymore. Except for, but then occasionally I get an idea, like, oh, I really want to have this for this tour. I want to have this as a front, and I want this to be made. But that is, as I said, that is sort of taken on a life of its own, and yeah.